RWBY Ice Queendom Episode 5, Awaken in a Dream, has officially released, so let me break it down for you. So this episode starts off in quite an unexpected way, I would say. I think most people at the end of last episode expected RWBY to get captured as she was overpowered and outclassed by Weiss. But at the start of this episode, Xion pulls her out of the dream and back into reality so she can tell everyone what happened. To be honest, I'm not the biggest fan of that. It feels like a certain sense of danger was lost. If Xion can just pull anyone out at any time so long as she can sense it, then, at worst, the initial victim is the only one who's really in danger. You kind of expected there to be a compounding threat. Weiss was the only one in danger, but now RWBY got a little reckless, so she also needs saving. But that didn't happen, and RWBY's able to tell everyone about what she saw, the dangers of the world, how strong Weiss is, and so on. It turns out Weiss is able to make people stronger inside of her dream depending on how they are perceived. Weiss's strength is theoretically limitless, but it only depends on how strong she believes she can be. And considering Jacques is always there pressuring her, probably not until the end. We might actually get a giant kaiju-sized Jacques as the final boss of this series. Anyway, the teachers decide it's best to differentiate Weiss from her nightmare counterpart, and thus she is dubbed Negative Weiss. And just absolutely being violated, they just have to say, I don't think I've ever seen her positive. Weiss is in a dream coma and won't stop being roasted. Even before that, RWBY was saying that Weiss was mad and seemed like she hated her, and Yang just has to say, she's the same awake. I love this humor so much. It is straight up my alley. It's the dynamic amongst friends that I love so much more than praising. Constantly roasting each other to me feels so much more like they are actually friends, and that's what friends do. So anyway, the girls have to decide who's going to re-enter the dream while Xion charges her aura. While RWBY wants to go back in alone, everyone finds it their responsibility and wants to help out as well. Plus, Weiss is super strong, so she'll need the backup. And the decision is made that all three girls go in together. Upon entering the dreamscape this time around, we get to see how Blake and Yang are perceived. Blake has but one cat ear and can chuck her weapon a mile over the mountains. I don't know what the hell that was. And Yang, she's kinda the same, even in her design. She's got her motorcycle and is perceived even stronger than she actually is. In fact, RWBY's the only one of the four that isn't stronger in the dream world, at least so we think. After getting their bearings down, the episode kinda repeats the same steps of the last one. They spawn in the same location, came across the same confusing signs, saw the White Fang attack another Schnee Company train, got inside the kingdom, and began searching for a way further in. It was so similar to the last episode, I thought everything reset for having exited the dream. But I guess that wasn't the case. Everything just happened again. It slightly makes me question the point of not having all three of them go in together in the first place. Everything plays out so similarly, it feels like the limited episodes this series has isn't utilizing it very effectively. If they all went in together from the beginning, we could have still gotten the discovery of everything, and they could have split up like they do in this episode, where RWBY went on her little adventure. But instead, we have to spend a bit of time retreading old ground. But anyway, the girls all split up and begin searching on their own. Yang finds nothing but confusing signs, Blake spies on some shadow people and finds a way further in, while RWBY comes across Team Juniper once more in their cages. Only this time they are accompanied by Pyrrha. To start things off, it's kind of weird that Pyrrha is here, isn't it? Part of the humor in the last episode was that everyone but Pyrrha was in jail because Weiss actually respected her. But now all of a sudden Pyrrha is also in jail for being a silly? It's an outlook that, to be honest, I don't get here. I understood why she was left out, but why she's now included kinda baffles me. But anyway, in an unexpected moment, she begins singing Mirror, Mirror. Talk about something you didn't expect to see. What's interesting about this is how it's showing us that Weiss possibly considered her and Pyrrha to be the exact same. We always knew that in terms of combat skills she thought that, Pyrrha is capable, Weiss is well trained, they're two of the best, and so that's why she wanted to team up with her at the start. But what I like about this is the emotional side of it as well. Weiss, as evident through Mirror Mirror, had a lot of expectations placed upon her that she tries living up to. Emotionally, she's beaten down, and she had to endure all of it alone. And I guess she must have thought Pyrrha had it the same way. She must have figured Pyrrha was just as lonely as herself, which is why she's singing this song here. I really like this moment, but at the same time I feel like it could have been done better. I like it because I already know the context of Mirror Mirror. But in terms of Ice Queendom, this is the first time the song is played. Originally, it was during Weiss's trailer, which this series reanimated, but they didn't use the music, which I now find incredibly odd, because that is the context for this. Hearing Mirror Mirror during that gives you insight into Weiss's character and how she feels, and with Pyrrha singing it here, you understand the emotional connection. But for people who haven't seen the original, they're not gonna make any sort of connection and think Pyrrha is just singing about being lonely. I think most people will get it, but in terms of a standalone product, it's a very incomplete picture. If they had the song, the instrumental, and everything here, I don't know why they didn't use it at the beginning. So while I loved the surprise of the moment, the setup to it I think should have existed. Anyway, RWBY, having never heard the song before, doesn't really seem to think anything of it. In fact, she seems more confused as to what's happening, and so walks off after getting a call from Yang. Turns out the shadow people Blake was observing are walking through a gateway, and so the team sees it an opportunity to advance further in themselves. RWBY wants to use yet another coin to create a decoy. She's getting very reckless with those. But Blake has an all-natural decoy, which she uses to distract the robots. And just like that, the girls have made it further in. As for Weiss, her determination to prove herself is only pulling her further and further down the path of the nightmare, becoming consumed and overtaken by the vines. We also come to learn that Dream, RWBY, and Yang were being held inside a tower where Weiss keeps all of her most treasured possessions. But since the real versions have entered, the girls have technically escaped, and so security is on patrol to try and find them. Instead of having to sneak around and deduce the weird world all by themselves, the two figure that the tower they're held captive in is deeper in the kingdom, so they might as well get arrested. So RWBY and Yang hand themselves over and are brought to Weiss's prized possession room. While it seems to be well guarded and a confusing place to traverse, turns out Blake followed them and somehow managed to get in through the window and also explore the mansion while she was at it. I guess they didn't really need to turn themselves over. Blake seems to have progressed just as far without it. But it's too late now. To progress further into Weiss's mind, Blake had found a basement before entering the room. But they all can't go together or it'll raise suspicion, so someone has to stay behind. Yang loses the rock, paper, scissors, and so chills in the bedroom. Meanwhile, RWBY and Blake progress through the basement, but on their path, Weiss was waiting for them, expecting something like this to have happened. Now we get a 2-on-1. Weiss rolled RWBY in the 1v1, and now I hope she rolls RWBY and Blake. Weiss needs these wins, okay? She has to beat RWBY, Blake, and Yang, and then they can all team up to fight Jacques at the end of the series. She's gonna get like 5 wins this series. She's padding her stats, okay? And there's nothing wrong with it. Weiss needs it, if anyone. I'll tell you something that's been happening that I'm really liking with each subsequent episode, and that's the characterization of each of the main girls. To be fair, it's not all of them just yet. It seems as the episodes go by, I slowly get to see how each one of them are being written and how they act. Last episode, I really enjoyed how childlike and naive RWBY was, and this episode, I loved how Yang was written. One of the things I hate about the main show is how much Yang doesn't feel like A, RWBY's sister, and B, the mature one of the group. Yes, Yang is wild, she's the fun one, she's the party animal of the group, but that's because she didn't have it as a kid. Raven wasn't there, Summer died, Tai Yang shut down after that. So Yang had to be very mature and help raise and look after RWBY. So inherently, she should have a lot more of a mature outlook on things ingrained into her. Sort of being the surrogate mom of the group. And I was getting that here. When RWBY comes out of the dream and is hesitant about talking about what she saw in the nightmare and she's kinda feeling bad about it, maybe it's true, and Blake is sorta feeling the same way, uncertain about if everything really is Weiss's true nature. But Yang just relaxes the room and is chill about everything and says, we'll just ask her how she actually feels later. Everyone's doing what we're doing and trying to interpret what we see and reflect that onto Weiss to try and understand her better, while Yang is like, there's no need for assumptions, we'll just ask. While I doubt this had anything to do with it whatsoever, I like to think that she has this outlook because of Raven. Yang probably has made many assumptions about why she left the family, and chances are, most of those thoughts were largely on the side of negative. And so she's simply telling everyone that they can just directly ask Weiss when they're face to face again, because they're probably just gonna assume the worst, while they can just get a direct answer. And she intends on doing that when she finds her mom. It's the exact characterization of Yang that I loved in the early volumes, where she was more curious and direct about dealing with problems instead of angry and childish. I need these writers to write me Yang and Raven's story, quite frankly. But continuing on her being the mom of the group, you get that vibe when RWBY continuously tries to use the coins. Yang is always stopping her, making sure she's not being wasteful. And on the topic of them being sisters, when the two decide that someone needs to stay behind, they decide to play rock, paper, scissors. But they instinctively just did it. Blake didn't know, but RWBY and Yang immediately went straight to it as if they'd done it 1,000 times already, and it was the obvious solution to their problem. It's a way of showing that they're so familiar with each other without saying anything. So I really get the sense that they are sisters here, which I love. The characterization of the four girls I am enjoying a lot more here. To be fair, like I said, Blake hasn't had too much time to shine, and Weiss I think is more going to be the long game. Plus, I don't think we're going to be getting too much of normal Weiss until the end of the series. So I can't really judge Nightmare Weiss the same I would the other three. To be honest, I enjoyed myself while watching this episode, but upon looking back at it, nothing much really happened. A lot of it feels like a rehash of the last episode, doing similar if not the same things before. It feels like it didn't exactly make the most out of its time. I enjoyed all of the moments of Team RWBY interacting with each other, and I'm not upset that I'm getting it. It may just be because I don't know what the series wants to accomplish. If it wants to push a large character arc, or if it wants to play it slow and spend most of its time with the characters interacting with each other. Because I don't know what the end game is, I'm kinda nervous that the series won't have enough time to do anything or leave an impression. But outside of that, I still enjoyed it. So take that for what it's worth. Anyway, moral of the episode is Pyrrha is a big ol' silly.